The text message glowed on Eliza's phone at 3:17 a.m. "I can't do this anymore." 5 words that shattered her world. If you've ever felt your heart break in real time, stay with me, because what happens next changed everything. And if this story resonates with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories that remind us of the power of human connection. Eliza stared at her phone, the blue light illuminating her tear-streaked face in the darkness of her bedroom. 3 years together, and David ended it with a text message in the middle of the night. She tried calling him back immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. Again and again, she called, each attempt more desperate than the last. By sunrise, exhaustion had overtaken her, and she fell into a fitful sleep clutching her phone. When she woke hours later, reality crashed down on her again. She scrolled through their text history, looking for warning signs she might have missed. They'd had their arguments lately, mostly about his long work hours and her feeling neglected, but nothing that signaled an end. Just last weekend, they'd talked about looking for a bigger apartment together. Had that all been a lie? Eliza dragged herself to the bathroom and barely recognized the hollow-eyed woman staring back at her in the mirror. Her dark hair hung limp around her face, and her normally bright eyes were swollen and red. She called in sick to work, something she never did, and spent the day alternating between crying and numbly scrolling through photos of happier times. By evening, anger began to replace the shock. How dare he end things this way? After everything they'd been through together, after he'd promised he'd always be honest with her. She deserved more than a cowardly text message. She deserved an explanation, face to face. With newfound determination, Eliza showered, changed, and drove across town to David's office. His car was still in the parking lot, even though it was well past 7. Typical. The job always came first. She waited in her car, rehearsing what she would say when he emerged. An hour passed before the building's front doors opened and David walked out. Even from a distance, something seemed off. His normally confident stride was replaced by a slow, almost shuffling gait. His shoulders were hunched, his head down. This wasn't the David she knew, the man who commanded rooms with his presence, whose laugh could light up her darkest days. Eliza stepped out of her car, her prepared speech dying on her lips as he drew closer. The man before her looked like he'd aged years overnight. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his face was gaunt, almost gray in the harsh parking lot lights. "David?" Her voice came out softer than she'd intended. He stopped, looking up with an expression of such raw pain that it took her breath away. "Eliza." His voice cracked on her name. "You shouldn't be here. You break up with me by text and expect me to just accept that?" The anger returned, fueling her words. 3 years, David. I deserved better than that. He closed his eyes briefly, swaying slightly on his feet. You deserve better than me. That's why I had to end it. What are you talking about? What's going on with you? She stepped closer, really seeing him now. The man before her was a shell of the David she knew. I can't. He shook his head, then winced as if the movement hurt. I can't drag you into this. Into what? David, you're scaring me. A car horn blared nearby, making them both jump. David looked around nervously, then grabbed her arm. Not here. Please, just go home, Eliza. Forget about me. No. She planted her feet firmly. Not until you tell me what's happening. Something in her stance must have convinced him of her determination. He sighed deeply, shoulders slumping further. My car. We can talk in my car. Once inside the relative privacy of his sedan, David's composure crumbled entirely. He gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white, and when he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I've been getting threats. 4 weeks now. At first, I thought it was just a disgruntled client, but it's escalated. Someone's been following me. They know where I live, where I go. They know about you. He turned to face her, eyes haunted. Yesterday, they sent me a photo of you leaving your yoga class. With a message that if I didn't cut all ties with you, they'd hurt you. Eliza felt cold fear wash over her. Why? Who would do this? It has to be connected to the Donovan case. David ran a hand through his disheveled hair. I've uncovered financial records that implicate some very powerful people in money laundering. The kind of people who don't hesitate to eliminate problems. Have you gone to the police? Of course. But without concrete evidence of who's behind the threats, there's little they can do. They advised me to be cautious, maybe take a vacation. He laughed bitterly. As if that would solve anything. So your solution was to push me away? To face this alone? Eliza felt a mixture of fear and indignation rising within her. I thought I was protecting you. His voice broke. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me. Eliza reached across the console and took his hand. David, we're partners. That means we face things together, the good and the bad. This isn't just bad, Eliza. These people are dangerous. All the more reason not to face them alone. She squeezed his hand. We'll figure this out together. For the first time that night, a flicker of hope crossed David's face. I don't know what to do next, he admitted. First, we're going somewhere safe. Then we're calling my cousin Michael, the one who works for the FBI, remember? This is exactly the kind of case they handle. The next few weeks were a blur of safe houses, interviews with federal agents, and sleepless nights. The FBI took the threat seriously, especially once David handed over the evidence he'd gathered. It turned out the money laundering operation was even bigger than he'd suspected, with connections to international crime syndicates. While the investigation proceeded, Eliza and David were moved to a secure location outside the city. Their temporary home was a small cabin by a lake, isolated enough to be safe but close enough to civilization for the FBI agents assigned to their protection to come and go as needed. Despite the circumstances, there was something almost peaceful about their forced retreat from normal life. Without the distractions of work and city living, they talked more deeply than they had in months. In the evenings, they sat on the cabin's small porch, watching the sunset reflect on the lake's surface. I'm sorry, David said one night, his arm around her shoulders. I thought pushing you away was the right thing to do. Eliza leaned into him. I understand why you did it. But promise me something. Anything. No more making decisions about us without me. Whatever comes, we face it together. He kissed the top of her head. I promise. 3 months later, the FBI's operation culminated in a series of coordinated raids across 3 states. 17 arrests were made, including 2 prominent business leaders and a city councilman. The evidence David had uncovered proved crucial to building the case. When they were finally able to return to their normal lives, nothing felt quite the same. The experience had changed them both, individually and as a couple. David left his high-pressure corporate law firm for a smaller practice focusing on consumer protection. Eliza, inspired by their experience, began volunteering with a victim advocacy group. On the 1-year anniversary of the night David had sent that text message, he took Eliza back to the lake where they'd stayed during the investigation. As the sun set over the water, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, he knelt before her. A year ago, I almost lost you because I was afraid, he said, voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. I thought I needed to walk away to keep you safe. What I've learned since then is that we're stronger together than we could ever be apart. He opened a small velvet box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. Eliza Bennett, will you marry me? Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. Yes. Always yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Eliza thought about how close they'd come to losing each other. One text message in the middle of the night could have been the end of their story. But instead, it had become just another chapter, one that had ultimately brought them closer, made them stronger. She had thought it was over. But he didn't walk away, not really. And neither did she. Instead, they'd walked through the darkness together and found their way back to the light. Life doesn't always give us clear paths forward. Sometimes we have to navigate through storms, make difficult choices, and trust that love is worth fighting for. Eliza and David's story reminds us that even in our darkest moments, connection and courage can guide us home. The threats that had once seemed so overwhelming were now just memories. The fear that had driven them apart had ultimately revealed the depth of their commitment to each other. And as they stood by the lake, wrapped in each other's arms, they knew that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together. Years later, when people asked how they knew their relationship would last, they would share this story, not to dwell on the pain, but to celebrate the resilience of love that refuses to surrender to fear. Because sometimes, the moments that test us most are the ones that show us who we truly are and what matters most. Eliza had thought it was over that night when her phone lit up with those 5 devastating words. But their story was just beginning. And it was more beautiful, more meaningful, and more profound than either of them could have imagined. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, casting the world in twilight's gentle glow, David and Eliza walked hand in hand back to the cabin, not as 2 separate individuals, but as partners who had discovered the true meaning of, for better or worse, long before speaking any vows. Their journey reminds us all that love isn't just about the easy moments. It's about choosing each other, again and again, especially when it would be easier to walk away. It's about finding the courage to stay when everything in you wants to run. It's about believing in something bigger than your fears. She thought it was over. He didn't walk away. And in that choice, that brave, terrifying, beautiful choice, they found a love worth fighting for.